the reason why we have a successful sort of situation in Tunisia, a less violent situation in Tunisia, and then somewhat violent but not quite so situation in Egypt, and why the situation was contained so quickly, is because these countries had different dynamism internally and different relationship with the international community. In Tunisia, you had an elite that had a lot of business interests with the Western powers, and that had a lot of that have a long history of cooperating, even on a security level, with Western powers. That allowed Western powers to have some say in the process. It gave them a leverage over not over the president at the time, but over some of the generals around him, to actually say, look, this situation is untenable, this is unacceptable, you need to do something about it. The civil society in Tunisia was also far more structured. They have had history of contact with the West. Many of the elites spoke a number of languages, not only Arabic and French. And when you speak a different language, you also mean that you have partaken part of the culture. You're exposed to the realities in that country and in that part of the world. So that allowed them to actually build up a system of civil society that was far more advanced than what you have seen elsewhere in the region. People, therefore, in outside Tunisia had some say in the process. They could mediate, they could pressure, and they could help guide the process. In Egypt, the same thing happened on a different scale, but it was still the same process. America had a lot of contact with the Egyptian army, with Egyptian political apparatus, and that allowed the American administration to have leverage. It wasn't easy to use that leverage, by the way. It took a bit of work, but when they made a decision, and they've managed to actually convince people to detach themselves from Mubarak. So it also worked because of that connection. In a country like Yemen, you've also had some contact, and America had some leverage, and Saudi had some leverage, and that was used as well to facilitate a solution. It didn't solve the problem because Yemen had other issues as well at stake, but at least it eased the way of Saleh out and transformed the conflict from one issue to another. In Libya, the US and France were willing to intervene, and that was sort of a different story. They took an early line under the responsibility to protect, and they decided to push Gaddafi out. It was an easier situation to intervene in, simply because Gaddafi's army was really in a bad shape and decrepit, and the potential risks were really few in that sense. And still, the process of intervention was not easy, and it took longer than everyone imagined. And that's the problem is with any military campaign. Things unpredictable always happen. In Syria now, a situation is very different. You have a country that was with very minimal relationship with Western powers. No Western security apparatus or political government had any say, basically, with Assad, or any leverage with Assad. The government of Assad lived under isolation for such a long time. Its cozy relationship, it had a cozy relationship only with Iran and Russia and China. Governments that are not interested in change in Syria at all. The only government that was pro-West that Assad had a good relationship with was Turkey, but that is a new trend. It was not yet a highly developed relationship. Security cooperation and military cooperation was not yet sophisticated enough. So Turkey did not have as much leverage as people thought, and its leverage was outweighed by what Iran, the leverage that Iran and Russia had.